All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our virtual campus training session number 3, Maryland's new laws and their impact on student survivors of sexual assault. This training is being hosted by the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault, or MCASA for short. Thank you for being with us today. My name is Tan Duque. I'm MCASA's Sexual Violence Prevention Coordinator. MCASA is a federally recognized state sexual assault coalition. We represent Maryland's 17 rape crisis centers and many other professionals who work to respond to and prevent sexual assault. Before we begin, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items to make sure we're all on the same page. Closed captions have been enabled. You can access them by going to the bottom of your screen and clicking on the closed caption button. Today's training is being recorded. You will receive a copy of the recording and PowerPoint slides in a follow-up email by the end of the week. Please use the chat to introduce yourselves to your fellow participants. If you have any comments during today's training, please put those in the chat as well. If you have any questions during today's training, please put those in the Q&A box. Any unanswered questions will be sent to the trainer for follow-up. Towards the end of today's training, we will be putting an anonymous evaluation link into the chat. We greatly appreciate all feedback. If you are seeking a certificate of attendance or a certificate for social work CEU credit, you must complete the evaluation form to gain access to the certificate request form. Finally, before we begin, I would like to provide a sensitive subject matter warning. Today's training may contain sensitive subject matter and may cause participants to experience strong emotional reactions. We encourage you to take care of yourselves during today's training and reach out to your support networks for help if needed. I think that covers everything. So with that, I'll turn it over to our presenter for her to introduce yourselves. Thank you.
Hello and good afternoon. My name is Dominique DeFries. I am the school policy attorney with MCASA, and I just want to welcome everyone to today's training. Many of you have already begun dropping in the chat which cat you are feeling today. So please continue to do so. I love to kind of do a light icebreaker and check in with everyone before we dive into the material. And also please feel free to drop your name and your organization in the chat so we can just know who's here with us today. Next slide, please. Again, as Tehan said, we are having today's third virtual campus training. The topic is Maryland's new laws and their impact on student survivors of sexual assault. Next slide. And before we begin and dive in further, I just want to take a quick time to make a little note of acknowledgement. This training is supported by the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy, and the opinions and conclusions expressed today are those of the trainers and do not necessarily represent the office's official policy. Next slide. So to begin, I want to do a quick poll to get everyone's engagement. So if you wouldn't mind answering the poll, it should have popped up in front of you right now. Just asking how familiar you are with Maryland's laws that took effect in 2025 related to survivor protections. And I see some answers coming in. We'll give you all a few more seconds. And I think we can end the poll now. So it looks like about half of you are somewhat familiar. 45% of you are not familiar at all, and about 6% of you are very familiar. So I welcome all of you. The ones who are very familiar, please feel free to add comments and any resources or knowledge you have that you might think will enhance this conversation into the chat. We love to hear it. And those not familiar at all, great. This is going to be very easy and beginner friendly, and we'll just be going over the laws. So hopefully you can use them in your practice or with students. Next slide, please. So our learning objectives for today. By the end of today's session, you'll be able to hopefully do three things. First, explain the key Maryland laws that took effect in 2025. And secondly, identify how these laws impact survivors of sexual assault on campuses. And thirdly, consider how your campus response, policy, and/or training might need to adapt to meet these changes in the laws. Next slide, please. Why is this important? Why is it important for us to get this refresher on law changes? It's because these laws shape our obligations and also reflect the changing community standards around consent and privacy and safety on campus and in the community. Also, understanding the latest Maryland laws can help us ensure that our campuses are compliant. But even more importantly, I think it positions your organization or institution to be a model of survivor-centered practice and make sure that you're aligning all your campus policies with both federal and state standards, which will promote consistency and safety for students. Next slide, please. So how are Maryland laws made? Some of you might be familiar with this, some of you may not, but I'm going to do a quick overview about Maryland laws, how they're created. So first, for some context, Maryland's legislative branch is the General Assembly. They meet for 90 days each year from January through April. And during this time, bills are introduced and then they're debated, and they must pass both our House and Senate before reaching the governor's desk to be signed off and made into law. If a bill doesn't pass by end of session, then it quote unquote dies. But it can always be reintroduced later at a new session. And many bills often are reintroduced at later sessions if they don't pass. Many of the laws go into effect either July 1st or October 1st, depending on the law and what it consists of. And understanding this cycle can just kind of help us plan for advocacy, policy revisions, and trainings like this one as we consider when the law is going to affect and when they're passed. Next slide, please. Okay, so first I'm going to cover some criminal law updates. Next slide. So I know I said we're doing 2025 laws, and we'll get to that. But first, I want to acknowledge one significant law change that actually happened in 2024 and has just been into effect now about a year as of October 2025. So one of the most significant changes from last year was a change to the definition of consent and the repeal of force in second-degree rape cases. So Maryland created a statutory definition of consent, and that law now makes it very clear that every person has a right to control who touches their body in a sexual manner. The law also removed the often outdated force or threat of force requirement in second-degree rape cases. And this change was very important because it centers a survivor's right to autonomy rather than focusing on if a survivor resisted or struggled during a sexual assault. So for college campuses, this means you should ensure all your consent trainings that you often give in August or early in the year during orientation are up to date and reflect this law. And I'd like to point out that actually students were key supporters of this bill when it passed in 2024, and many of them testified in Annapolis and also wrote to their representatives because they noticed that many of the college campuses in Maryland already had definition of consent that was not about force or threat, but more about right to control who touches their bodies and about autonomy. So students were actually asking that the legislator align the criminal law and definition of consent more with what the campuses already had, a more open definition of consent. So I just wanted to highlight that. And, you know, it was always important that students do get involved with supporting different bills when they feel it's appropriate to do so. And just something to think about in the chat, just a prompt for you all to discuss or even just take with yourself and discuss among your team. Has there been any, has this change or this change in the past year influenced any of your colleges or campuses' consent discussions during orientation or staff training? So, as I said, this is just a short question. You can answer in the chat, or you can also take it with you as a kind of take-home question to consider. And if you haven't changed how you discuss consent on your campuses and in your training, this might be a time to consider making those changes and making sure all your consent definitions on campus and consent education align with the updated law. Next slide, please. So we have another Zoom poll question that's going to pop up because we're going to get into a law that's focused on revenge porn and deepfakes. So this question is just, have you encountered issues involving deepfakes or AI, artificial intelligence, generated sexually explicit images on your campus? Or if you're not on a campus, maybe at your organization or in your community. I'll give a couple more seconds before we end the poll. Okay, great. Thank you. So it seems like 50% of you have heard of incidents, but have not seen it personally. About 12% of you say, yes, this is an issue. And about 40% say, no, I've not heard of this being an issue or have encountered it. Okay, so it's good to know that. And now next slide, please. I want to talk about kind of some changes to the law around this. So Maryland strengthened its laws on non-consensual intimate imagery sharing, also known as revenge porn in the law, but many organizations and groups have started to move to the term non-consensual intimate imagery sharing, or NCII, because it is more inclusive and not all sharing of intimate images is necessarily for a revenge matter. Okay. So now the law includes that AI generated or computer created deep fakes are also covered under the criminal law. And victims of this kind of harm can pursue both criminal charges as well as civil lawsuits, which include seeking attorney's fees with those civil lawsuits. And this kind of update in the law reflects kind of a growing recognition that technology facilitated sexual abuse is very real and very devastating to survivors who've experienced this, and that students are especially vulnerable to AI generated and computer created deep fakes as a population. Next slide, please. So what might these deep fakes kind of look like for students? So how might you see them? On campuses, they can look like an ex-partner may be sharing sexual photos without consent, or creating fake sexualized images using AI apps. There's a lot of apps now where you can take a person's face and put it on a body that's not there and theirs and have them doing some sexual act, or removing their clothes from a picture where they are clothed. And these images can be spread through, especially on campuses, group chats, social media, or cloud drives that students share among each other within hours. And so universities and campuses should proactively be educating students about digital consent and reviewing their policies around online misconduct, because we're seeing a lot more of these acts happening on college campuses, and especially among student bodies. And also prevention programs need to begin changing and evolving to include more technology-based abuse discussions and discussions around digital privacy, when there's been digital privacy violations, and when there are concerns about these sorts of issues, where a student can go on campus to get them addressed. Next slide, please. So I have a little scenario for you all, just a little thing for you all to think about. Liam and Raven are classmates. At a Halloween party, they have a nasty fight, okay? And Liam takes a picture from Raven's Instagram where she's fully dressed and using a very accessible AI app, takes Raven's face and places it on a nude body. Liam then shares the modified naked picture of Raven in a group message with some other students and colleagues on campus. So in the chat, I would love for you all to kind of really answer or consider answering the first two questions. What steps could Raven take to address Liam's actions? Okay. And then secondly, what responsibilities might the campus have? And what supports may the campus offer Raven? So I want you to be thinking your own campus. If someone came to you and said something like this had happened, how could your school address it? And then maybe how could Raven get redress either on campus or even off campus? And I'll give a moment for some responses in the chat. Okay, I think someone talked about, seeing some things come in. So administration office, yes, report to police. Yeah, that's of course always a good one. And get support from campus staff. They could make a Title IX report. Documentation. Yes, Barbara, documentation is very important because a lot of times with these virtual images, they people can delete them. If you're on Snapchat or know about Snapchat, that's one place a lot of these sorts of images are shared, and they usually delete after clicking or within 24 hours. So it's very important you document the images. So if they're deleted, you have backup and evidence. Yes, Title IX. You should make sure your school's Title IX policy, a lot of them do, but some of them aren't up to date, making sure that sexual harassment covers these deep fakes and AI generated images, because a lot of them might say distribution of intimate images, but they don't address if the image has to be real or if it can be computer generated. And then yes, witnesses and evidence. Yes, taking notes of this, making sure you keep documentation and those sorts of things. Next slide, please. And I think we're actually going to skip this slide because we discussed it. Thank you. So just a final note on revenge porn and deepfakes. So when the conduct occurs in context where the school has like control over the party's setting, for example, the deepfakes were shared in a student class group chat or were distributed on campus, it could trigger Title IX, right? Because that's either on the school campus or in a school-related function. However, if the incident happened outside of the school's location or outside of the school's related control, so for example, a student is sending these deep fakes from a cafe off campus to some students who are also off campus at the moment, that doesn't necessarily trigger Title IX. But even when these things happen off campus, schools really need to make sure that they address it under either the school misconduct or harassment policy to ensure students have access to this redress. And either way, make sure students understand that digital consent matters and that there are remedies for revenge porn and deepfakes, either through campus, Title IX, or the school harassment policies or misconduct policies, and also legal remedies available off campus through just reporting to law enforcement or the commissioner's office. Next slide, please. So this is another law that may surprise you, but I would like to just bring it up. Maryland now treats animals as separate victims of abuse in abuse cases in the criminal context, and that includes sexual abuse cases. And I mention this because for a lot of students, their pets and emotional support animals are very important to their emotional healing, and many students may live with a service animal in on-campus housing, or even off-campus housing. They might have a pet or emotional supports animal. So if someone harms a survivor's or a student's pet, it's now recognized legally as harming a second victim. And this just reinforces how important it is for campus responders to treat these incidents with sensitivity and awareness, especially maybe if the animal is harmed. Now, I haven't heard of a lot of cases on campuses where animals are also victims, but I do see a lot of cases in the community where a perpetrator might harm an individual and then also their pet or service animal in some additional retaliation. So I just wanted you all to be aware of animals as victims. And I think it's just an interesting new law that's went into effect. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we have another Zoom poll. Just keep you all on your toes. So, do your student housing agreements and visitor policies address surveillance devices? And my next slides are going to be about changes to visual surveillance and laws around that. Okay, you can end the poll now. I think we have a good response. Thank you. So 76% of you, wow, we're unsure about that. So that might be something to research or look into, talking to your residence life and council on campus. 14% said yes. Okay, that's good to know. And a couple people, about 10%, said no. Okay. So thank you for sharing those results. Let's go to the next slide so we can talk about visual surveillance. Okay. So Maryland has now expanded the definition of a private place in its surveillance law to explicitly include residences. So now residence means, of course, what we all might think of our house where we live, or our apartment, but they can also include dorm rooms, shared apartments, and other living spaces that count as private places. So secretly recording or observing someone in these spaces without consent is illegal. And campuses should make sure to update their school codes and housing policies accordingly. I especially think now that we have a lot of students, they're not living alone, but they're living in like a dorm setting or a group setting. And there might be a situation where a student puts, Ring camera or something small, very accessible in um, their shared dorm common area or suite common area, for example, for maybe many reasons. Maybe they're trying to figure out who's stealing the cookies out the common room fridge. I don't know, something like that. But those kinds of recordings, especially if they catch private acts or someone walking unaware the camera's there with limited clothing on, or maybe in the robe or changing or anything like that. That's not good. And these are private areas that cannot be surveilled. So just to consider making sure your policies are up to date on surveillance items in private places like the dorm room, common room, suite living areas. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then also, this is another related law around surveillance that changed, but it adds that visual surveillance in someone's house or private area can constitute harassment. So, surveilling, we think of surveillance like looking through a window. Yes, that's harassment, but also if you put a camera or another recording device in someone's space. courts can also require that if you get, for example, a peace order, the removal or repositioning of a camera that has been installed in a private place and that is creating a hostile or harassing environment. So it's important that campus police, the people in charge of your housing understand this connection, especially when we're finding cameras are discovered in dorm rooms or dorm bathrooms or dorm common areas, and how to address this sort of visual surveillance. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this law clarifies that student dorms are now kind of clearly covered as a residence or a private place. As I mentioned, campus laws need to continue or expand to protect against non-consensual recording in private places, and student code of conduct and safety protocols will definitely need to address these changes going forward. So all of you who were maybe unsure if visual surveillance was in your agreements for visitors or for dorm mates, I would look into that, and definitely you can connect with us if you have any questions about that or want more information how to make sure these things are covered. Next slide, please. Okay, just another little scenario, and you can drop some comments in the chat if you would like about it. So Jasmine and Shay share a dorm room, like a lot of college students do. And Jasmine hides a camera in the dorm room. Okay. And one day, the camera catches Shay changing her clothes. That might have not been, Jasmine's intent. Maybe she was just trying to catch Shay stealing, her lunch out of the refrigerator, but it catches her changing her clothes. So, first, I want to see, does any of your colleges or universities protect or have like kind of protections for privacy violations in shared spaces like common areas and dorm rooms? And then also, second question, I would love to see if anyone has some comments on this about does your school differentiate between a shared and private space and one's right to record in these spaces? So I'll give you all a little time to think about it. And it's okay if you don't know the answer to this, but it is definitely something I think all people who are working on campuses need to be thinking about and should consider how shared space and private spaces are similar and different, and what happens when a student is caught recording in these spaces. So I don't see any comments yet on this, but if you all have anything, feel free to drop it in later. And then I think we can move to the next slide. That will be good. And then last one. Again, on the surveillance, are you aware of any situations where students have been recorded or surveilled in private areas? And I'm seeing some results come in. I think we'll give it a couple more seconds, Tehan, and then you can just end the poll. Great, thank you. So I'm seeing about 50% said no, which is great. I'm glad students, at least where you all are, aren't recording others in private spaces. But I'm also seeing about 20% yes, and 20% you've heard of this happening, but not on your campus. So I just want you all to be aware. It definitely is happening. We are seeing trends just across the country of people using, as technology becomes easier to use, smaller, more more easily hidden. These things are happening in more places where people are being recorded without their permission, and it's just something to think about. One thing I even think about is now with the ability to record from like your glasses or like a pin on your coat, and that kind of technology being accessible, what that might look like if people are recording in like the sports locker room or in their dorm room. So As this technology just becomes more available, we need to be more aware of it and making sure our policies align with it. So next slide, please. So this is related to criminal law. This isn't a change in the law, but a change in a rule. So I still think we need to cover it because this went into effect in July 1st of this year, and it does impact student survivors. So the CICB, or Criminal Injuries Compensation Board, recently changed its rules to make compensation more accessible for survivors. So survivors are no longer required to report to law enforcement to qualify for compensation. So they can just fill out compensation as long as they can prove a crime happened. They don't have to necessarily have reported it to the police or law enforcement. And also eligible expenses now include therapy, childcare costs, lost wages, transportation to and from medical appointments or psychological care related to the violence the survivor suffered. And also, there's now funding for relocation expenses, one-time relocation expenses, and even lock replacement. And this helps survivors, especially our student survivors, recover from an assault without having additional barriers. So without having to report to police, they can still recover. And many victim student survivors might not report to the police because of many barriers, stigma, maybe previous bad experiences with law enforcement. And now also these expanded eligibility. A lot of students, if they were sexually assaulted in one off-campus apartment, may want to move to a different location or get their locks replaced and may not have the funding to do so because they're a student and studying full time or have just a minimum wage job and they can't afford these changes. So having these monies available is very important, I think, for survivors. And I will just make one note. The CICB is a payer of last resort. So, of course, the student survivor would have needed to try to cover these expenses through other means, such as insurance. But if they are unable to, they can always fill out a compensation form. Next slide, please. So again, this is kind of what I already talked about, but the change is just going to allow for increased access. It's going to be easier for student survivors to get compensation for costs like counseling and lost wages and all other sexual assault injury related expenses. And as I said, the changes make it possible for students who don't report to law enforcement, maybe due to stigma or just negative associations they may have with law enforcement, to access this support. Next slide, please. And then just so you know, just a little, I guess, plug for the Sexual Assault Legal Institute under MCASA. We can help students, survivors navigate the CICB process. So please, if a student has concerns or issues about that, you can send them our way. And also it's important that staff who work regularly with survivors, like staff at your Title IX office or in campus life, know about these changes and are aware of these resources for student survivors. So it's just one other resource they could provide to the student survivor if they come in seeking resources or additional support on your campus. Next slide, please. Okay. Education. So these are some laws or changes that have happened related to education. Next slide. So we have a new health curricula law. This new law ensures Maryland's K through 12 health curriculum includes age-appropriate lessons about consent, sexual health, online safety and protection, and gender identity. So this doesn't impact how you all talk about like health on your campus or any kind of health-related things you may have in orientation or student life activities, but that just means that future college students who went to high school in Maryland and attend your college will all often have a stronger understanding of boundaries and safety than they had before, and there'll be a more uniform understanding of these things. And this is a great thing, I think, that students, at least coming from Maryland high schools into or Maryland K through 12 schools into higher education in Maryland, have these kind of uniform background understanding about online safety, sexual health, consent, those things. But it's also a great opportunity for faculty and staff and those who prepare orientation materials to continue reinforcing these lessons in a college context and just expand them. So again, this is something that is for the K through 12, but we're hoping in a few years' time when it gets implemented with Fidelity that you'll be seeing maybe some changes and some different, more uniform understanding around these topics with your incoming classes. Next slide, please. So again, if you have heard me speak at any presentation, I have brought up this federal change. And I know this is Maryland laws, but we are virtual campus trainings. And so I can't not have this slide and explain these things to you. So if you've heard this already, I'm sorry, but we're going to talk about a little bit more. So we are back to 2020 Title IX regulations, not 2024. So why are we back to 2020? The 2020 regulations were enforced by the Department of Education until August 2024. And then we got 2024 regulations that had been in the works for several years. Shortly after, in January of 2025, the Department of Education switched and returned to enforcing the 2020 regulations because the 2024 regulations were challenged and a court ruled them unenforceable. So for many college campuses, this wasn't a big lift. They had been working under the 2020 regulations. When they went to 2024, it was only for a few months, and then they're back to something they already know. So hopefully your Title IX offices and campuses have switched back this year in the past few months back to the 2020 regulations, making sure they're implemented, making sure any materials you have out there available for students reflect the 2020 and not the 2024. Of course, if you have any issues with that or questions, MCASA and Sally, we're here to help, and we can help make sure you have the right materials and that all your materials you're giving to students, staff, faculty, anyone on campus related to the regulations aligns with 2020. Okay. We also have a great resource that I think would be good to plug now. It is a comparison chart. It's the intersection of Title IX and Maryland law, or the Maryland Higher Education Code. It is a free resource that is available on our website. You can download it for free. And in our follow-up materials to this training, we can send it along as well. And it provides a great reference tool to compare kind of the 2020 Title IX regulations, Maryland Education Code, and see how these laws are aligned, where they might contradict a little bit, and how to make sure your school is complying with both the federal and the state laws. Okay, and it's a great, easy resource for compliance officers, Title IX office people, and advocates alike to use. So we will make sure that resource is available for you all as well. Next slide, please. Peace and protective orders. Okay, we've had a few changes to the peace and protective order laws. There's really only one change, though, that I think will really impact students. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Oh, we have a Zoom poll. Never mind. Let's do the Zoom poll first then, and then we'll go to the slide. So, how familiar are you with the differences between a protective order and a no contact order? And when I say a no contact order, I mean a no contact order issued by your school. I think we can end the poll right about now. Okay, it seems we're split. 38% are very familiar with the difference. 38% are also somewhat familiar, and then 23% are not familiar. So because we have some people somewhat familiar and not familiar, I do want to maybe give a brief overview of the differences. So next slide, and then I'll get into what's on. Nope, we're skipping this slide. Thank you. So just the difference between a peace and protective order and a no contact order. So a no contact order is something kind of the schools usually put in place. There doesn't have to be a hearing or any findings for them to put in place. It says you, John Doe, can't contact Jane Doe, right? And if you contact them, if you know, speak to them on campus, you send them a message on Instagram, you communicate with them in any way or through a third party, we could, you know, there could be a school sanction or punishment. So like we could consider maybe expelling you or suspending you or um, some other punishment through the school. Okay, so no contact orders are through a school, and they kind of decide how it's set up. Also, usually they're mutual no contact orders. So it'll be like John Doe, you can't talk to Jane Doe. Jane Doe, you also can't talk to John Doe. If you do, there could be some repercussions. Now, peace and protective orders are not through the school. They're issued by, well, they're from a judge, and the judge can make, in some cases, maybe findings, but essentially, the peace and protective orders don't just apply to school, they apply off campus as well, um, anywhere the parties could be. So a protective order might say, John Doe, you can have no contact and you need to stay away from Jane Doe. And that means if John Doe tries to make contact on school, or maybe he tries to see her at the grocery store off campus, or at a party off campus, that piece of protective order would be in place. And there's not just like school repercussions, but there's legal repercussions if John Doe was to violate it. He could be fined. He could be sentenced to up to 90 days in prison if he has been found to violate the protective order, things like that. So I always tell students that you know, you should understand the benefits of a peace and protective order and a no contact order. And for many students, getting both is a good thing. The no contact order, of course, helps on campus, but what if they're off campus? What if they want some stronger protections? A peace and protective order can often be the way to go and provides extra safety measures for students. So I just want to highlight that. The law change was that courts may now issue permanent protective orders, which are indefinite protective orders, with the respondent's consent. So for students, if someone has, for example, assaulted them and they're concerned for their safety and would like something that's longer than a year duration or 6 months, however long the peace or protective order is set for, they can get a permanent protective order in some cases. And this allows the student to, you know, not be stressed about having to repeatedly renew the protective order or ask for an extension in some cases. And campuses and you all as advocates and administrators can really play a crucial role in helping survivors understand when a peace order or when a protective order or when a campus no contact order best fits the student's needs. So it's just important to be aware of this change and make sure that when you talk to students about these things, you are mentioning, yeah, we have the campus no contact order. It's quick, great, easy to get. you also may want to consider, and of course it's your choice, a peace or protective order if applicable. Okay, next slide, please. Funding. So we're going to talk about some laws or funding changes that happened in 2025 as well. Next slide, please. So first, we have the Abortion Care Grant Fund. This grant program improves access to abortion care services throughout Maryland for individuals in the state and for survivors of sexual assault. Sometimes the timely and affordable reproductive health care can be a key part of their recovery. And this change just helps ensure that this option remains accessible to survivors and student survivors, regardless of their income or insurance, and make sure that barriers that might arise because of funding are reduced. Next slide, please. So this, we had a lot of concern going into 2025 because there were some bills or efforts to cut funding to rape crisis centers. Fortunately, the legislator rejected both proposals that would have cut VOCA funding, and they also continued allegations of funding specifically for rape crisis centers and recovery centers, which was very important. So these centers are important for all survivors, but especially student survivors because they provide 24-hour hotlines, counseling, and also sometimes hospital and a court accompaniment when available. And they can be really invaluable resources for campuses, especially for when you're considering you have students who are off campus who need survivor-centered support and may not be able to go on campus to get the counseling services you all have on campus. If maybe you could refer them to the Rape Crisis Center in their county instead of having them come all the way to campus to get those services. Also, I think about sometimes certain campus resources may be closed or limited. So, for example, over the holiday breaks or in between semesters, a student may want to talk to a counselor or have some services, and the campus just might not be able to provide them during that downtime or break. In those cases, again, you can refer the student survivors to the local rape crisis center in their county, and they can get supports through that center as well. So I think it's just a great resource. A lot of the campuses in Maryland I've seen have great on-campus counseling and services, but sometimes there might be a gap in those services. Our students just can't get to you because we have a lot more online learners or just the campus is closed for some reason. And so having access to these supports off campus is wonderful. Next slide, please. And again, I sort of covered this, but again, on the MCASA website, we have a map of all the rape crisis centers by county. You can click and ask the student what county they're in. They say Frederick County, you put Frederick in, or Montgomery, Howard, whatever county, and it will pop up with the name of the rape crisis center, contact information, phone number, all of that. So that's a resource we have on our website. But again, these rape crisis centers provide that 24-hour crisis hotline, which I really think is the very important thing, especially for students. The therapy and different assistance with the legal judicial system and also hospital accompaniment and other things as needed. Next slide, please. So the impact on survivors. So in summary, these laws give survivors a lot more options for redress and clearer protections under the law, including around consent, as we saw, AI or deep-faked image abuse, privacy, especially in one's residence, and access to compensation when it comes to the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board. Universities and college campuses need to ensure their policies reflect these updates and that staff training include discussions now on the deep fakes and use of AI, surveillance in private places, and digital abuse, as these things are only going to continue to grow, and we're going to be seeing more and more of these issues on campus in the coming months and years. Next slide. So just a little reflection question. We're not going to do the slide because you've all been so great in the chat. I just want you to drop in the chat what's one thing you are going to take away from this presentation, maybe one law or one fact you've learned that you're going to take back with you to your community or college campus. And I'd love if a few people could drop those in the chat. Well, thank you, Angela. Yes, I have a lot more about no contact and protective orders if anyone wants to follow up on that and go more in depth. The chart, yes. We will make sure to include that chart in the materials so you have access. The victim status as animals. Yes, I always find that so fascinating. Criminal injuries compensation. Yes, yes, we can provide you with information on that as well. And yes, animals. We all love the animals. Yes, and housing policy, making sure you all check your school's housing policy and look into that visual surveillance just to make sure, roommates. I think the policy making sure it says like roommates can't be surveilling their roommates, even if it's implied, making sure that's just clear. Okay, thank you. Thank you for all of these things. Next slide, please. So kind of looking ahead, the next legislative session is coming up January 2026. The legislators will hit the ground running. So there's going to be a lot more work, and advocates will continue working on bills to prevent harms to survivors of sexual assault and just increase survivor-centered resources. So if you want to keep up to date with us, we do put out our legislative priorities usually in December, January. So in the next month or so, they'll be coming out. If you want to keep up to date on those, you can sign up for our e-alerts. Follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, all the social medias. And then you can also visit our website and go under the Law and Public Policy tab. And there you will see our legislative priorities, things that have passed in the last year, and what we're looking to have passed in 2026. Okay, next slide, please. So are there any questions or comments that anyone would like kind of to have addressed right now? Okay, seeing none, I think we can go to the next slide. So stay connected with us. As I said, join our mailing list. You can also get our e-alerts through that. And also we have brochures on different topics related to prevention and sexual assault on campus that you can order and have directly shipped to you for free. So if you have some brochures or you want some brochures to be able to share with your students or faculty and staff, please look at the brochure library and be sure to place an order for free. Next slide. And again, Dominique, the school policies attorney, under MCASA, there is Sally, which is the Sexual Assault Legal Institute. We provide free legal representation and services to all survivors across the state of Maryland. These are some areas we can help with. And of course, if you have student survivors who need our resources or just know anyone who might need our resources or just want to call and see how we might be able to help, please put them in touch with Sally. You can find all our information on our website, and yes, I'm sure it will be sent out in our follow-up email as well. And this is my direct contact information. And I think I'll just hand it over to Tehan. Thank you everyone for being so engaging in the chat. I've really appreciated all your comments and feedback.
All right. Thank you so much, Dominique, for that wonderful presentation. I would now like to turn everyone's attention to the chat where we just posted the anonymous evaluation link. We greatly appreciate any feedback as we constantly striving to improve. Additionally, if you are seeking a certificate of attendance or a certificate for social work, CEU credits, you must complete the evaluation form. After submitting the form, you will see a box at the top of your webpage containing a link. If you click that link, it will take you to the certificate request form. You can expect to receive your certificate within 4 to 5 weeks of submitting the form. As a reminder, you will receive a follow-up email by the end of the week. The email will include a copy of today's video recording, PowerPoint slides, evaluation link, and instructions for requesting a certificate. If you have any questions, you can respond to that email. Thank you again for coming today, and we hope to see you at future training sessions.